Bonjour tout le monde and welcome to 10 reasons why you should be watching Who Wants to be a Millionaire to learn a foreign language. This might seem completely insane, but I've recently had quite the epiphany and have realized that if you are struggling to find something to listen to in whatever language it may be that you're learning, Who Wants to be a Millionaire is an excellent place to start. Now, of course, the focus of this video will be on the French version, Qui veut gagner des millions, but one of the benefits of Who Wants to be a Millionaire is that there are many, many international versions. So if you are learning Italian, there's an Italian version. If you're learning Russian, there's a Russian version. If you're learning Swedish, there's a Swedish version. So if you're not learning French, this video still may be relevant to you. So reason number one is that the questions are written on the screen, essentially providing you with subtitles for the part of the program that you need to understand the most. A lot of people find subtitles very distracting, so it's quite nice not to have them throughout, but of course you want to make sure that you understand the questions being asked. So if you haven't quite understood what the presenter's saying, it's very nice to be able to read it word for word on screen. Reason number two is that this is a good opportunity to learn some useful words. Of course, some of the questions will be really obscure and they'll contain words that you might not even know in your native language. You can ignore those, but you're bound to find some vocabulary that you can use. And again, because you're hearing it and seeing it, you can make the connection between individual words and their pronunciation. It is the perfect opportunity to learn. Reason number three is that it's a good memory aid. Remembering that you learnt a particular word watching Who Wants to be a Millionaire is surprisingly effective. For example, I remember learning the Italian words for frog and helmet in a particular episode of Who Wants to be a Millionaire. There's something about this program which makes memorizing the words that you're learning much easier. Reason number four is that compared with other game shows in which timing is important, the questions in Who Wants to be a Millionaire are read at a fairly natural pace and are often repeated. There's a French game show called Question pour un champion, and the questions in that program are read at a pace which cannot be measured by human instruments. It's ridiculous. It's far faster than any native speaker would normally speak in a conversation. So that's really not that useful. But in Who Wants to be a Millionaire, there's no time pressure. And so they read at a very normal pace, which prepares you much more thoroughly for the real world. Reason number five is that it's an engaging program. You want to know how this person will do. You want to know if they're going to win the million. So even if you don't watch an episode from start to finish in one go, it's very easy to become engrossed and very invested in an episode. And that's great because it means that you're not doing it because you have to. You're doing it because you want to. Reason number six is that conversation between the questions is quite relaxed and often fairly simple. They're talking about themselves, their jobs, their families. It's also really not that consequential. If you don't understand the conversation, that's not going to ruin the experience for you. You still know whether someone's getting the questions right, even if you don't understand the conversation in between. Basically what this means is that there's not a story that you need to follow. It's not like watching a film where if you haven't understood one scene, you might not understand the rest of the film. The conversation is a bonus as far as I'm concerned, and if you don't understand it, don't worry. It is true that during this conversation they might use quite formal forms of address, but I found that this is largely out of courtesy. Everything that they say is pretty candid, very normal, everyday conversation. Plus, whether they use the formal forms or not is actually quite revealing and can teach you something. It shows how important these forms are. For example, in the French version, the presenter pretty much always uses the formal vous with the contestant. But in the Italian version, they almost exclusively use the informal tu, which reflects how much more important the formal form of address is in French compared with Italian. Reason number 7 is that individual questions, ad breaks, and those checkpoint questions offer convenient stopping points. You don't need to feel obliged to watch the whole thing in one go. Episodes are usually an hour long, and an hour can be an awful lot of listening in a foreign language. Use these natural breaks to break everything down into smaller, more manageable chunks. Even if it means you watch one question at a time, if that's all you can handle, then that's fine. Reason number 8 is that the hesitation that people do while they're thinking about the answers offers some respite from what may be quite quick speech. Listening to people speak at lightning speed can be very draining. So it's very nice when a contestant takes a moment to think about a question, because you don't have to do any listening in those few minutes while they're thinking. Reason number 9 might sound a little bit cheesy, but watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire is good for your random general knowledge. You can learn some really useless facts through this program, and while that might not have anything to do with language on the surface, again, it's a good memory aid. If you can remember that you learnt a particular fact in a particular language, it will probably help you to remember the words involved with it. So yeah, it's a little bit corny, but there's nothing wrong with watching this program to learn a few bits of useless information. And finally, reason number 10 is that the phone a friend part of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire can teach you a little bit about phone etiquette. I will admit that this is a very minor point, and in some languages might not be important at all. For example, in English we just say hello like you would in the street. But in some languages, you don't say the normal word for hello over the phone. For example, in French, people tend to answer the phone with allô rather than bonjour. Now, don't get me wrong, if you say bonjour over the phone in French, people aren't going to come and chase you with a knife or anything. It's fine, but it is a good cultural practice to pick up on, and if you're learning another language, the word you use over the phone might be much more important than that. So pay attention to small details like that, even though they might not seem all that important. My 10 reasons to watch Who Wants to Be a Millionaire in order to learn a foreign language. I really think this is something that you need to exploit. There are episodes galore on YouTube and elsewhere on the internet. They're an easy resource to get your hands on, so do give it a go. Of course, if it doesn't work for you, don't keep doing it. You know, this has worked for me in a couple of languages, and so I wanted to share it. But if you don't find it as useful as I do, then find something else. It really is okay to disagree with me. If you have some other materials that you think are just as useful, then please do share them in the comments. People really do have difficulties finding materials to listen to. So if you've found something that is useful to you, then please do share it. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, à bientôt.